Establishing the very first chapter, a magnificent, towering castle stands proudly against the sky. Wealthy nobles gracefully gather for a lavish outdoor banquet, mingling near elegantly decorated tables while a lone, blonde-haired girl stands entirely isolated in the foreground. Retreating from the bustling, joyous crowd, the solitary girl sits despondently on a stone bench beside a grand, continuously flowing fountain. Gripping her ornate dress in profound despair, the melancholic girl silently wishes to go home before being startled by a sudden, concerning inquiry about her well-being. Gasping in absolute shock, the trembling girl whips around and immediately recognizes the speaker as the highly esteemed His Highness Valentino. The elegantly dressed prince stands peacefully before her, his composed demeanor radiating a quiet, aristocratic authority amidst the garden's lush foliage. Apologizing profusely for the perceived trouble, she is quickly reassured by the prince, who gracefully admits that he also desperately needed a quiet break from the loud festivities. Taking a seat beside her at the fountain, Valentino correctly identifies her as Lady Chelsea of the Marquis Lunen's prestigious family, prompting a nervous, stuttering confirmation from the flustered girl. Gently patting her shoulder, the prince comfortingly advises Lady Chelsea to stop looking down so much and instead harbor far more personal confidence within herself. Offering a remarkably warm, dazzling smile, Valentino tenderly compliments the stunned Chelsea by sincerely declaring her to be quite lovely. However, the romantic atmosphere instantly and brutally shatters as the prince ruthlessly states that he absolutely cannot get engaged to her. Gasping in utter disbelief, Chelsea is verbally struck down as Valentino casually dismisses her as gloomy, slow, and frankly entirely devoid of any conversational fun. A confident girl named Jennifer smoothly intervenes to apologize for her sister making them uncomfortable, to which Lord Nether dismissively replies that it is perfectly all right. Smirking condescendingly, the noble coldly suggests that Chelsea should deeply observe and learn a thing or two from her undeniably superior sister, Jennifer. Adjusting his glasses with palpable disdain, her own brother Damien ruthlessly declares that she will never be even half the woman Jennifer currently is. Returning to her aristocratic home, Chelsea faces the harsh, collective judgment of her mother and father, who exasperatedly question how many times her engagements have embarrassingly fallen through. Taunting her without an ounce of mercy, her sibling spitefully reveals that everyone behind her back cruelly whispers about how Chelsea simply cannot do a single thing right. Slamming a clenched fist down in furious disappointment, her father aggressively demands to know why she cannot just be successful and obedient like Damien or Jennifer. The agonizing parental tirade violently concludes with a strict, unforgiving order for Chelsea to immediately stop causing the noble family any more humiliating trouble. Even the household staff actively turns against her, bitterly complaining that if the young lady would just act properly, the hard-working servants would not constantly face unfair scolding. Haunted by the cruel, inescapable whispers of her peers, Chelsea is devastatingly reminded that high society universally refers to her as the defective young lady. Collapsing to the cold floor in a puddle of tears, the broken girl agonizingly wonders why nobody loves her, why her desperate efforts are completely ignored, and why absolutely nothing ever works out. Weeping uncontrollably into the dark void of her room, Chelsea confesses a profound, crushing self-hatred and sincerely wishes she could just completely vanish from existence. Suddenly, an ornate mirror reflects an unexpected, terrifying distortion as desperate, disembodied voices urgently beg someone to stay with them and frantically ask if they are okay. Gripped by a sudden, agonizing sensation, Chelsea screams out in sheer physical torment, desperately begging the empty room for anyone to help her. As she helplessly collapses onto her lavish bed, a mysterious, comforting voice softly echoes through her rapidly fading consciousness, promising to securely hold onto her. Amidst the swirling, chaotic void of her swooning mind, a remarkably bright, commanding voice urgently instructs her to reach out and firmly grab their hand. Morning sunlight beautifully pierces the extravagant bedroom curtains as the young girl peacefully opens her eyes, seemingly awaking from a very deep, highly troubled slumber. Sitting up and rapidly glancing out the grand window at an unfamiliar, opulent courtyard, she instantly releases a piercing, thoroughly confused scream as she wonders where she is. Clutching her head in immense, groggy confusion, she mutters about experiencing a super weird dream before finally taking in her entirely bizarre surroundings. Sprinting toward the large bedroom mirror in sheer, unadulterated panic, she shrieks at her own reflection, frantically demanding to know who she is looking at and where she currently resides. Examining her totally foreign body, the bewildered girl nervously notes her missing nail polish and mysterious orange hair with purple eyes, utterly convinced she was just riding a train to Shibuya mere moments ago. The frantic, undeniably loud commotion immediately attracts two highly concerned maids who confidently burst through the heavy wooden doors, anxiously asking what the matter is and respectfully addressing her as Lady Chelsea. Completely unbothered by their formal aristocratic titles, the internally displaced girl confusingly asks who they are talking about, while fragments of cheerful, modern memories briefly flash through her overwhelmed mind. Sweating nervously at her master's remarkably bizarre, highly uncharacteristic behavior, the blonde maid hesitatingly attempts to address Lady Chelsea and quickly calm the rapidly escalating situation. Staring blankly ahead in pure shock, the reincarnated girl experiences a monumental revelation, loudly exclaiming that there is absolutely no way she has somehow become this mysterious person when she is actually Kurama. The two utterly baffled, highly anxious maids exchange deeply concerned glances, gently pointing out to the frantically gesturing girl that the reflection in the mirror is undeniably her. Tearing the expensive bedsheets apart in a desperate, frantic search for hidden equipment, the panicked Kurama wildly accuses the innocent staff of filming a cruel prank show and demands to know exactly where the cameras are hidden. Terrified by her apparent, rapid descent into absolute madness, the distressed maids shriek that it will be a complete disaster if she acts like this, violently sprinting away to urgently fetch a medical doctor. Reaching out to hurriedly stop the fleeing servants, Kurama accidentally trips and heavily crashes to the wooden floor with a loud thud, bewildered as to what she did to warrant calling a doctor. Scrambling to her feet in the ongoing, chaotic frenzy, Kurama accidentally collides quite heavily with one of the returning, equally panicked maids. Reeling back from the sudden, surprisingly sharp impact, the stunned girl lets out a soft gasp as a strange, overwhelmingly powerful sensation begins to rapidly assault her mind. A stern, intimidating man and an elegant woman aggressively storm into the bedroom, furiously demanding an explanation for the unacceptable commotion and ruthlessly berating Chelsea for causing endless problems immediately after collapsing from a fever. The imposing, intensely angry man sharply commands her to explain why she stupidly requested a doctor and exactly how long she plans to humiliate the noble family, leaving Kurama to internally scream in confusion about who these totally hostile strangers are. Trembling violently under the incredibly intense pressure, the maids attempt to apologize, but the furious lord immediately cuts them off, viciously blaming their gross incompetence for failing to properly watch over his deeply flawed daughter. Barking a final, truly ruthless ultimatum, the tyrannical father threatens the crying servants with immediate, unforgiving dismissal if they ever slack off again, explicitly declaring that even the maids in this specific household are entirely worthless. Watching the terrifying, utterly shocking display of aristocratic cruelty, Kurama stands frozen in pure bewilderment, silently questioning what the hell is actually going on and why the innocent maids are now suffering such severe, unprovoked abuse. Suddenly clutching her fiercely throbbing head in absolutely blinding agony, a deeply foreign, powerfully echoing voice reverberates through her entirely overwhelmed skull, clearly whispering the name Chelsea Lunand. Paralyzed by an incredibly intense, almost magical migraine, the reincarnated girl helplessly gasps for air as decades of foreign memories and deeply repressed, overwhelmingly traumatic emotions begin violently flooding into her modern mind. Absorbing the tragic, deeply unloved life of a timid girl possessing absolutely no self-confidence, Kurama horrifyingly realizes she is literally living the nightmare of a sister who was relentlessly mocked and coldly treated by her own cruel parents. The furious father aggressively questions if Chelsea is even listening to them, ruthlessly demanding that she silently reflect and do better. Glaring with sheer, unadulterated exhaustion, the young girl ruthlessly orders the yelling adults to just shut up. The imposing father and the elegant mother instantly freeze in utterly stunned silence at her incredibly sudden, shocking defiance. Laying face down on her bed, fragments of the original Chelsea's agonizing memories surface, loudly echoing her deep, crushing self-hatred. Snapping back to the present, the reincarnated girl fiercely defends Chelsea's own pace, bluntly calling out the parents for yelling non-stop without ever actually planning to listen to her. Clutching her wildly throbbing head in utter frustration, she completely dismisses all their screaming as incredibly annoying. Adjusting his glasses in sheer disbelief, the bewildered father stammers, utterly shocked that this violently defiant girl is actually his timid daughter Chelsea. Gesturing protectively toward the frightened maids, She boldly points out their innocence and heavily criticizes the hypocritical parents for demanding her to speak only to instantly desire silence when she finally does. Physically shoving the utterly flabbergasted parents out of the bedroom, she bluntly orders the pops and ma'am to scram so she can speak privately with the servants. Slamming the heavy wooden door on the aristocratic adults, she sharply turns her undivided attention toward the two highly anxious maids. Ignoring her furious father's violently muffled commands to wait right there, she firmly and completely locks out the outside world. The two young servants look up with wide, fear-filled eyes, completely paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming shift in their mistress's typically submissive demeanor. Softening her aggressive tone, she accurately guesses that their highly strained relationship stems entirely from how the original Chelsea previously treated them. Gazing down in deep, sorrowful shame, the guilt-ridden maids offer a remarkably quiet, heartbreaking apology. Attempting to bridge the massive gap, she struggles to explain that Chelsea has actually been wanting to deeply apologize to them this entire time. Placing a hand gently over her chest, she earnestly relays that the original Chelsea is deeply thankful they stayed by her side, feeling the girl's gratitude whispering from within. Clearing her throat slightly, she watches the completely overwhelmed maids desperately ask if Lady Chelsea truly harbored such kind, hidden feelings toward them. Determined to fix the broken household dynamic, she boldly proposes they talk out their grievances properly if they are still upset with Chelsea. Offering a brilliant, impossibly radiant smile amidst a metaphorical bed of roses, she sweetly and genuinely asks if they can finally make up. Completely breaking down into loud, ugly sobs, the two deeply relieved maids cry out their lady's name in pure, unstoppable emotional release. Pouring out their long-held trauma, the weeping servants confess how heartbreaking it was to feel like outcasts, enduring vile curses and unfair scolding while their mistress silently abandoned them. Through heavy, agonizing tears, they reveal their desperate, totally unfulfilled wish for Lady Chelsea to have simply possessed the ability to speak her mind more. Clutching her wildly tear-stained face, the blonde maid emotionally realizes that her master is actually an incredibly kind and sweet person. Listening to their genuine pain, the reincarnated girl warmly realizes the original Chelsea wasn't truly disliked, but was merely trapped at a horrific disadvantage that the maids couldn't bear to watch. Connecting with their deep frustrations, she empathizes perfectly, admitting that she also absolutely hates getting unfairly scolded and totally gets how they feel. She silently acknowledges the horribly toxic environment that forced everyone to start acting out in such defensive, miserable ways. Bowing their heads in absolute, unwavering loyalty, the emotionally drained maids offer their truest, most sincere apologies to Lady Chelsea. Smiling brightly like the morning sun, she cheerfully declares that they should just call it even and happily get along from now on. Urgently commanding them to stand up, she excitedly insists they become genuine friends and eagerly asks for their names. Instantly assigning them modern, highly affectionate nicknames, she enthusiastically christens the two confused girls as Nelchi and Lily9. The utterly bewildered but thoroughly happy maids formally introduce themselves as Lina and Nell. Grasping their hands with immense, genuine warmth, she excitedly vows to learn absolutely everything about her two new best friends. Pumping her fists with fiery, modern determination, she rallies her stunned maids to stop feeling sorry and aggressively show the world what they are made of together. Suddenly struck by an incredibly urgent thought, the energetic girl whips around toward the elegant, antique bedroom furniture. Shattering the wholesome fantasy atmosphere, she frantically asks her thoroughly confused maids for the absolute quickest route to Shibuya ASAP. As the maids stare in frozen, comic disbelief, she rapidly mutters about her scary bestie Love-chan and the desperate need to reach Akihabara. Pacing around the lavish room in absolute panic, she bombards the seated, sweating maid with highly confusing geographical questions about Shibuya. Nervously tapping her cheek, the maid hesitantly informs her highly erratic master that no such places exist within the Leverage Kingdom. Hearing the medieval terminology, Kurama's modern brain practically melts out of her ears in sheer, unadulterated shock regarding the Leverage Kingdom. Watching their lady's absolute mental breakdown, the deeply concerned maids strongly reconsider fetching that medical doctor after all. Spiraling into a massive existential crisis, she frantically wonders if she is even actually Chelsea to begin with. The grand, opulent mansion rests quietly under the starry night sky, entirely oblivious to the chaotic identity crisis occurring within its luxurious walls. Sitting dejectedly amidst the floral bedsheets, the defeated girl finally accepts that this is not Japan and she is now permanently Chelsea of the Leverage Kingdom. Violently thrashing around her luxurious bed, she loudly wails for her modern best friend Love-chan and dramatically cries about not understanding anything at all. Completely exhausting her mental capacity, she abruptly decides to stop thinking entirely because the immense stress simply makes her head hurt anyway. Staring into the mirror with a cheeky wink, she fully embraces her crazy cute new appearance, deciding there is absolutely no use crying over spilled milk. Slapping her hands down with renewed, fiery determination, she boldly declares that time is wasting and they must keep moving forward. Throwing her arms up in total, joyous victory, she enthusiastically vows to live this aristocratic lady life completely true to her own modern self while stuck as Chelsea. Flipping open an elegant, ornate book, she practically decides to heavily rely on the original Chelsea's personal diary for immediate survival. Rolling onto her stomach, she curiously wonders about a specific, highly recurring name in the diary, completely unaware of who His Highness Valentino actually is. A sprawling, magnificently grandiose mansion stretching proudly under the brilliantly bright sky. Deep inside the opulent estate, a desperate, breathless cry echoes through the luxurious room as someone gasps that it is much too tight to breathe. A diligent maid aggressively tightens the heavy strings on a terrified, violently trembling blonde girl, explaining patiently that the painful garment is a necessary corset required to wear the dress. The highly distressed girl complains that her squeezed guts feel like they will literally burst from the agonizing pressure, while the maid sternly insists that a proper lady must wear her corset correctly. Utterly confused by the rigid concept of being a refined lady, the reincarnated girl wonders aloud if that is some bizarre new fashion brand, while another maid calmly pours a steaming cup of tea nearby. As the dutiful maid forcefully squeezes the stiff corset, she notes that Lady Chelsea's memory has been rather fuzzy since yesterday, attributing her completely different, vibrant personality to the lingering side effects of a severe fever. Presenting a beautifully layered garment with a cheerful flourish, the smiling attendant advises the deeply bewildered Chelsea that she simply must get accustomed to wearing proper noble dresses. Surveying the overwhelmingly dark and aggressively dreary wardrobe, the newly awakened girl internally cringes at the original Chelsea's unbelievably boring, dreadfully bleak taste in clothing. Pausing to mentally reconsider the drab garments, she realizes with sudden, piercing clarity that the original Chelsea actually genuinely favored bright, vibrant colors instead. A profound, silent realization violently washes over her widened eyes as she begins to deeply piece together the grim, restrictive reality of her current noble situation. The gossiping maids carefully reveal that all of Lady Chelsea's dreary clothes are actually chosen by someone named Lady Jennifer, a mysterious name that instantly triggers a vague, deeply unsettling sense of familiarity within her awakening mind. Shaking off the oppressive, gloomy thoughts with an impossibly bright smile, Chelsea enthusiastically declares her immediate, burning desire to head outside and fully explore the expansive garden. Brimming with boundless, infectious energy, she excitedly commands her utterly stunned attendants to immediately show her around the rest of the sprawling estate for the day. The young maid stares in wide-eyed, absolute disbelief as the formerly gloomy, withdrawn Lady Chelsea beams with an impossibly radiant and entirely uncharacteristic smile. Striding excitedly through the massive, sunlit manor, Chelsea marvels aloud at the absurd, seemingly endless length of the grand hallway stretching before her. Gazing upward in sheer awe at the towering, intricately carved ceilings, she excitedly compares the magnificent, luxurious architecture to a grand castle from far overseas. Stepping gracefully out into the brilliant sunlight beneath a delicate, lace-trimmed parasol, Chelsea laughs delightfully and brightly exclaims that this new outdoor experience is incredibly fun. Trailing cautiously behind their joyous mistress, the gossiping maids pity her completely altered demeanor, stubbornly attributing her surprisingly bright personality to the tragic lingering effects of her recent high fever. Entering the vibrantly blooming outdoor grounds, she stops completely in her tracks and lets out a breathless gasp of pure wonder at the breathtaking beauty of the expansive garden. Gazing softly at the fully bloomed roses, she deeply misses her past life as a simple country girl named Kirara, where she constantly wove charming flower crowns for her beloved younger siblings. Spotting a beautiful, lush patch of familiar white clovers, she eagerly asks her hesitant maid if she can safely gather the delicate blooms to craft a lovely flower crown. While happily sitting on the ground weaving her intricate floral creation, Chelsea casually questions her future noble purpose, prompting her maid to tentatively suggest she learn refined manners to secure an advantageous marriage. Thrilled by the incredibly positive prospect of personal growth rather than boring etiquette, Chelsea enthusiastically demands to be taught absolutely everything about self-improvement. The peaceful, sunlit moment is abruptly shattered when the haughty Lady Jennifer arrogantly arrives, glaring down with clear disdain as she demands to fiercely know why Chelsea is sitting like a peasant on the dirt. A severe, bespectacled man seamlessly joins the cruel scene, adjusting his glasses with intense irritation and openly sneering that Chelsea's distinctly childish behavior is utterly disgraceful to behold. Staring down at her condescendingly, the intimidating Lord Damien immediately interrogates the bewildered Chelsea, aggressively demanding to know if she has sent an official apology letter to a powerful man named Lord Nether. The cruel man viciously berates her for her past disgraceful actions and completely ruined engagement, while the deeply panicked maids anxiously try to usher their humiliated lady away from the highly public confrontation. Instead of appropriately cowering, Chelsea drops her jaw in absolute, electrified shock, loudly declaring that the bespectacled man's heavily abrasive attitude is incredibly rude. A frantic, terrified inner voice screams at her sheer, unadulterated ignorance, desperately reminding her that these exceptionally hostile strangers are actually her very own older brother Damien and deeply wicked little sister Jennifer. Trembling with genuine indignance and absolute, glaring confusion, Chelsea fiercely stares back at her aggressive tormentors and openly wonders exactly who these unbelievably rude people think they are. A massive, horrifying revelation finally strikes her spinning mind as she connects the cruel faces to the haunting visions from her feverish dreams, clearly recognizing the deeply arrogant girl as her weird, nasty little sister. Her newly awakened mind races to put the chaotic puzzle pieces together, suddenly identifying the bespectacled tyrant as her own older brother while mistakenly assuming he might also be the elusive, mysterious Lord Nether. Mocking her older sister's unwanted outdoor presence, Jennifer cruelly sneers with dark amusement that the normally reclusive Chelsea must have entirely lost her fragile memory to the recent, devastating fever. Completely and masterfully ignoring the highly venomous insults, Chelsea cheerfully asks if anyone has bright red flowers to add to her woven crown, leaving her malicious siblings absolutely stunned by her clearly perceived madness. Channeling the wise, grounding advice of her beloved past life's friend, Chelsea actively decides to completely ignore the incredibly annoying people trying to ruin her day, much to her haughty sister's mounting, visible frustration. Extending a delicate white clover upward as a bright peace offering, she sweetly invites the utterly flabbergasted Jennifer to sit down and happily play in the dirt alongside her and the gathered maids. Unfazed by their shared, utter shock, Chelsea earnestly confirms her sweet invitation, happily offering to actively teach her bewildered younger sister exactly how to weave the charming, intricate flower crowns. Breaking the tense, heavy silence, Jennifer's cruel maids erupt into highly vicious laughter, openly mocking the Marquis's daughter by viciously suggesting the brutal romantic rejection by Lord Nether has completely shattered her fragile mind. Observing the sharply escalating mockery with deep, unhidden disgust, Chelsea internally notes that Jennifer's mean-spirited attendants are just as incredibly useless and profoundly rotten as their arrogant master. The highly malicious servants continue to boldly cackle right in front of her unblinking face, entirely unable to contain their deeply disrespectful amusement at the once gloomy noblewoman's newly bizarre, pathetic behavior. Their incredibly cruel laughter is violently cut short as a sudden, sharply intense aura completely shatters the deeply humiliating atmosphere surrounding the garden. Fixing the highly disrespectful servants with an icy, terrifyingly unblinking glare, Chelsea smoothly drops her cheerful facade and dangerously demands to openly know if Jennifer is truly as nasty as the two of them. Slowly placing the beautifully woven flower crown atop her own head with calculated grace, she coldly addresses her deeply stunned sister, harshly pointing out the absolute disrespect of allowing her foolish servants to openly talk shit about her superior. Emitting an aura of terrifying, unyielding authority, she concludes with brutal, crushing finality that useless, undisciplined maids are the direct, entirely natural result of a completely useless, pathetic master. Profoundly humiliated and entirely outmaneuvered, Jennifer aggressively grits her teeth in a furious, impotent snarl as the incredibly heavy weight of the biting, public insult violently lands. Instantly pivoting to expertly play the highly vulnerable victim, the younger sister buries her face in her small hands and dramatically wails to their protective brother about how unbelievably mean Chelsea is being to her. Blinded by highly misplaced protective rage, the deeply furious brother violently lunges forward and roughly grabs Chelsea tightly by her collar, viciously bellowing at her for daring to explicitly insult their precious little sister. Even as her deeply horrified maids scream her name in utter, unadulterated panic, Chelsea completely refuses to flinch, confidently holding her unhinged brother's aggressively raging gaze with intensely narrowed eyes like absolute ice. Desperately leaping headfirst into the highly violent fray, a fiercely loyal maid physically attempts to forcefully pull the violently enraged Lord Damien away while he relentlessly screams for Chelsea to instantly retract her harsh words. In the chaotic midst of the highly aggressive, panicked struggle, the delicate, painstakingly woven flower crown is tragically knocked away, heavily tumbling to the cold, hard stone ground, where its pristine petals scatter entirely. A sudden, piercing close-up captures a young woman's eyes widening in absolute shock as the violent chaos unfolds rapidly before her. Glaring with intense, unbridled fury, the bespectacled Damien viciously brands her as useless trash and fiercely demands she immediately retract her harsh words against Jennifer. Refusing to cower, Chelsea fiercely grabs his aggressive wrist with an icy, unyielding glare and dangerously orders him not to touch her. As her terrified maids watch in stunned silence, Chelsea disgustedly shakes him off while flatly declaring that men who raise their hands against women are absolute scum. The biting, unexpected insult completely stuns Damien, causing a nervous bead of sweat to roll down his face as his previously overwhelming rage falters into sheer disbelief. Pressing her sudden advantage, Chelsea boldly questions if he is exclusively playing the devoted knight for Jennifer simply because he blatantly favors her. Clutching his arm in flustered frustration, Damien angrily screams for her to shut up while she calmly questions if he is truly even her brother. Looking at him with profound disappointment, Chelsea openly mocks his pathetic immaturity and seriously doubts if someone so violently impulsive could ever properly inherit a marquis. Completely humiliated by her sharp, piercing words, the enraged brother violently snaps and screams at her not to get so obnoxiously cocky. Dismissing his pathetic tantrum entirely, Chelsea turns her back on the furious man and calmly instructs her trembling maids to follow her away from the chaotic scene. Glancing over her shoulder one last time, the newly emboldened noblewoman playfully sticks her tongue out in a brilliantly childish display of utter disrespect. A sharp, violent tension completely shatters the heavy air as Damien seethes silently in the garden, utterly paralyzed by his older sister's newfound fiery defiance. Having finally escaped the exhausting confrontation, Chelsea aggressively stumbles toward a grand doorway with a heavy groan as her deeply concerned maid anxiously asks if she is all right. Clutching her painfully restricted chest in absolute agony, the breathless girl violently demands that someone immediately remove the suffocating corset crushing her delicate ribs. The deeply loyal maids erupt into a sudden, frantic panic, furiously hovering around their distressed mistress while begging to know if she has fallen gravely ill again. Desperately waving away their medical concerns, Chelsea fiercely screams that the unbelievably tight corset is the true culprit, prompting her frantic attendants to immediately rush her to change. Staring blankly into a highly ornate mirror while dressing down, Chelsea silently touches her bruised skin as a maid quietly notes that the violent encounter left a visible mark. While a gentle maid carefully brushes out her long hair, a furiously seething Chelsea violently declares that she will never forgive Damien and deeply regrets not biting his nose off. Venting her burning, unadulterated rage, she aggressively details how the unhinged maniac violently grabbed her clothes, actively choked her, and even dared to physically shove her innocent maids. Despite the comforting presence of her loyal servants, a dark, incredibly heavy sense of foreboding slowly washes over the furious girl's racing mind. The quiet sanctuary of her room is violently shattered as a booming, aggressively furious voice explicitly demands to know the exact meaning behind her recent, chaotic actions. Summoned to the grand parlor, Chelsea heavily realizes she has walked directly into a massive family ambush, finding her stern parents, a smug Damien, and a weeping Jennifer perfectly assembled against her. Her elegant mother aggressively coddles the dramatically sobbing Jennifer, coldly accusing Chelsea of constantly stirring up malicious trouble for her strictly favored siblings. Staring down with intense, unyielding patriarchal authority, her severe father dangerously mentions that he has heard highly disturbing reports of her entirely selfish behavior. Desperately trying to inject some basic logic into the incredibly biased room, Chelsea fiercely defends herself by explaining she merely retaliated against a deeply disrespectful maid. Completely ignoring the blatant provocation, her furiously protective mother viciously guilt-trips Chelsea for allegedly plunging the highly fragile Jennifer into a deep, tragic depression. Putting on a brilliantly pathetic, award-winning performance, Jennifer forcefully squeezes out fake tears and loudly wails that her entirely cruel older sister unfairly branded her as the absolute worst. Chelsea stands utterly paralyzed by sheer shock as the manipulative younger sister seamlessly weaves a horrifyingly twisted narrative, outright accusing Chelsea of violently attacking their older brother. Seizing his perfect cue, the highly deceitful Damien triumphantly rolls up his expensive sleeve and cleanly presents a series of bloody scratches to their deeply horrified parents. As Jennifer dramatically buries her face into their mother's highly sympathetic embrace, Chelsea's mind completely shorts out at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of their perfectly coordinated lies. A heavy, suffocating realization violently crashes down upon the isolated girl as she finally understands she is the universally designated villain of this entirely twisted household. The sheer, overwhelming injustice of the situation sharply crystallizes in her widened eyes, instantly replacing her initial panicked confusion with a cold, terrifyingly absolute clarity. Refusing to silently accept their incredibly vile execution, Chelsea boldly steps forward and deliberately pulls back her delicate lace collar to dramatically expose her pale throat. The arrogant older brother suddenly freezes in sheer, unadulterated panic as he zeroes in on the massive, undeniably violent bruise rapidly blooming across her highly visible skin. With Damien sweating in absolute terror, Chelsea calmly informs the stunned room that she only left those pathetic scratches because he was actively trying to violently choke her. Desperately attempting to salvage her rapidly crumbling narrative, a highly panicked Jennifer loudly insists that their beloved, perfect brother would never resort to such savage violence. Cutting entirely through the pathetic lies with surgical precision, Chelsea fiercely accuses the younger girl of constantly orchestrating toxic drama simply to remain the household's most pampered favorite. As the cornered sister violently screams for her to shut up, Chelsea relentlessly presses her massive advantage, demanding to know if all these vicious lies are explicitly designed to isolate her. Backed entirely into a highly defensive corner, the trembling younger sister furiously doubles down on her innocent victim act, loudly denying any possible shred of malicious deception. Panting heavily from her own incredibly dramatic exertions, the spoiled sibling cowardly hides behind their highly protective mother while Chelsea stares back with absolute, unyielding disgust. Drawing deeply upon her past life's painful experiences with manipulative women, Chelsea strategically calculates that fighting a universally beloved favorite is an incredibly dangerous disadvantage. Deciding the entirely biased trial is absolutely pointless, she reaches for the heavy door handle, only to be sharply halted by her father angrily demanding why she constantly causes trouble. Refusing to play along with their incredibly rigged game for another second, Chelsea flatly states that she is entirely done participating in a sham trial where no one intends to listen. Utterly infuriated by her newfound, absolute defiance, the severely strict father violently loses his temper and furiously screams at her to be exactly like her younger sister. Pausing dead in her tracks, Chelsea slowly turns her head with a dangerously calm expression and directly challenges her incredibly biased father's highly foolish demand. With an incredibly steady, icy voice, the isolated noblewoman genuinely asks the entirely silent room what truly separates her inherent worth from her deeply pampered younger sister. Staring down her deeply unnerved family, she fiercely calls out their incredibly toxic dynamic of constantly ganging up on her without ever once bothering to hear her actual side. A flash of genuine, incredibly profound sorrow briefly crosses her sharp features as she quietly asks if her existence is truly considered that massive of an unforgivable failure. Greeting their highly cowardly silence with a dismissive sigh, she smoothly walks away while her enraged father fruitlessly bellows for her to immediately fix her incredibly disrespectful attitude. Left completely stunned in the wake of her absolute departure, her highly anxious mother nervously mutters that such a dangerously rebellious attitude will cause absolute disaster at the upcoming royal tea party. Bursting enthusiastically through the door, Chelsea loudly declares the end of their discussion while promising to earn their trust if she succeeds. Leaving a completely bewildered individual behind, she bids them a cheerful farewell. Tapping her chin with a self-assured smirk, she reasons that flawless behavior at the upcoming tea party will leave them with absolutely no room for complaints. Ignoring frantic pleas to wait, she strides confidently down the ornate hallway, casually tossing back that they will finish their talk later. Throwing the heavy double doors wide open with a dramatic slam, she urgently calls out for her loyal companions, Nelchi and Lilynine. Flumping onto the elegant sofa in sheer exhaustion, she bitterly complains about how seriously pissed off she is, while the startled maids quickly offer her freshly prepared tea and ask if she is all right. Eyeing the delicate assortment of pastries and tea, the conversation decisively shifts toward the daunting topic of refining her aristocratic manners. Desperate to perfect her etiquette before next month's crucial tea party, Chelsea strategizes while a maid gently reminds her that hiring an elite instructor requires official permission from the master or mistress. Hesitantly recalling a connection through her mother, the maid suggests a specific manners teacher but warns that this woman's previous students all quit within days because they simply could not endure her strictness. Gripping her teacup with fierce determination and a wild smile, Chelsea boldly proclaims she will gladly endure anything if it guarantees her sweet revenge against her detractors. A tense, silent week swiftly passes in preparation for the grueling trials ahead. Bowing respectfully, a servant sincerely apologizes for guiding the esteemed guest through the estate's back entrance due to unforeseen circumstances. Immersing herself in strict aristocratic protocols, Chelsea begins a rigorous letter exchange to master the nuanced art of high society etiquette. Arriving with an aura of absolute authority and intimidating grace, the formidable Duchess Maeve finally makes her grand entrance. Kneeling with profound respect, Chelsea formally introduces herself as Chelsea Lunenard and earnestly expresses how much she looks forward to learning from the master. Staring down with piercing judgment, the Duchess immediately shatters the girl's confidence by bluntly criticizing her terrible posture. Startled into letting out a confused gasp, Chelsea is instantly reprimanded by the intense aristocrat who commands her never to make weird noises. Looming terrifyingly close to the sweating noblewoman, Maeve coldly dissects her flaws, noting that her voice is far too low and her smile is completely awkward. Snapping her elegant fan with a sharp crack, the instructor demands a clear affirmation, rewarding Chelsea with a curt note of approval when she loudly shouts her compliance. Trembling violently in the background, the terrified maids watch as Maeve admits she grasped the general idea of the situation from Chelsea's earnest letter. Staring intently into her new pupil's eyes, the Duchess acknowledges Chelsea's deep-seated desire to finally prove herself to her demanding family. Openly admiring that fiery spirit, Maeve declares she will make a rare exception to teach her, demanding that the young lady fully live up to her sky-high expectations. Plunged into an unprecedented crucible of etiquette, Chelsea finds herself trapped as the truly hellish days of relentless training begin. The narrative abruptly shifts its focus to the regal and mysterious Valentino. Bathed in soft sunlight, a handsome, blonde-haired young man stands thoughtfully by an ornate window overlooking the lush gardens. Turning with a polite and gentle smile, Crown Prince Valentino of the Kingdom of Levrange asks his companion, Kendall, what is on his mind? Stepping forward respectfully, Kendall brings up the topic of the eldest daughter, specifically mentioning Miss Chelsea. Identifying himself as Kendall Maeve, son of Duchess Maeve, he asks the prince if he recognizes the ambitious daughter of the Lunenard Marquis. Pausing to search his royal memories, Valentino confirms he has indeed spoken to Miss Chelsea once before. Intrigued by the unexpected connection, the prince asks for more details after Kendall reveals she apparently begged his mother for a manners teacher. Confirming the bizarre rumor, Kendall nods and states that securing her strict instruction was indeed the girl's apparent plan. Leaning forward in genuine surprise, Valentino questions why Duchess Maeve would accept, explicitly noting his belief that she had permanently stopped teaching. Lifting a delicate teacup, Kendall explains that his famously strict mother was unexpectedly moved by Chelsea's heartfelt letter about wanting to prove herself to her family. Resting his chin on his steepled fingers with a captivated grin, the Crown Prince muses that Chelsea sounds like a wonderfully interesting girl. Looking forward to the upcoming social season, he confidently predicts that next month's tea party should be incredibly fun. Returning to the harsh reality of Chapter 4, Duchess Maeve coldly sips her tea and ruthlessly commands her exhausted student to do it again. Slumped over in absolute misery, a deeply exhausted Chelsea attempts to balance heavy books on her head while groaning. Pushed to her absolute physical and mental limits, the narration confirms that Duchess Maeve's relentless training was seriously strict. Trapped in a vicious cycle of brutal corrections, Chelsea endures a barrage of sharp commands demanding she fix her posture and start over from the top. Glaring down with a mixture of pity and disdain, the imposing instructor mockingly questions if this pathetic display is the true extent of her resolve. Collapsing onto the floor with visibly shaking legs, the defeated noblewoman desperately begs for just a quick break from the torment. Suddenly snapping out of her despair, a manic, strained smile stretches across Chelsea's face as a terrifying second wind overtakes her. Screaming that she can still keep going, she wildly attempts to balance an absurd tower of books, causing her panicked maids to frantically try and stop her while Maeve casually watches. Dragged into the aristocratic crossfire from the middle of the grueling sessions, Nelchi and Lilynine also unexpectedly started getting trained by Duchess Maeve as her personal maids. The brutal curriculum expands exponentially to include mastering perfectly silent table manners, flawless greetings, memorizing noble faces, and reciting the history of the Leveringe kingdom. Clutching her feather pen late into the night, Chelsea looks up with a serene, confident smile and promises that she will do her absolute best too. A peaceful exterior shot of the grand estate gracefully establishes that 2 incredibly long, grueling weeks have finally passed. Standing with impeccable posture and a completely blank expression, Chelsea effortlessly balances a massive stack of books on her head while receiving a begrudgingly given pass. Gliding gracefully down the hall alongside her stern mentor, Chelsea is finally told that, which means, at least now, she is considered presentable. Celebrating her barely passed status as a monumental bonus of a bonus pass, the joyful girl is immediately scolded by Maeve not to get cocky. Curtsying flawlessly in a dazzling gown, Chelsea sincerely thanks her harsh instructor, but the Duchess quickly reminds her that how well she puts these skills to use at the real tea party is entirely up to her. Taking a graceful bite of her treat, Duchess Maeve observes with quiet satisfaction that Chelsea has transformed into a completely different person since their rigorous training began. Meanwhile, a diligent maid silently approaches the low table, carefully setting down an elegant tray bearing a glass jar and a single rose. Resting beautifully on the silver platter is a heavy glass jar brimming with saved coins and a decorative key, sitting perfectly beside a crafted ribbon and a fresh rose. Staring intently at the highly unexpected offering, Duchess Maeve arches an eyebrow and sharply questions what this jar of money is supposed to mean. Sweating profusely, a desperate Chelsea admits it is not enough to cover the tuition, apologizing frantically for dipping into her personal savings without asking but swearing to eventually pay the Duchess back in full. Bowing her head in deep shame, she desperately pleads to pay the remainder once she achieves success, confessing she had to keep this arrangement entirely hidden from her incredibly strict parents. After a long and heavy silence, the imposing noblewoman glances at the meager jar and flatly declares that she absolutely cannot accept this payment. Struck with sudden, absolute terror at the immediate thought of rejection, Chelsea gasps loudly in utter disbelief and begs to know why. Lowering her gaze with a rare, fleeting hint of vulnerability, the formidable Duchess softly begins to reveal the heavily guarded truth behind her exceptionally harsh methods. Openly acknowledging her fearsome reputation as an overwhelmingly strict instructor, Maeve shockingly confesses that she was actually planning to permanently retire from teaching after this final session. Explaining that she merely wanted to push her students to their absolute limits to foster true growth, she notes sadly that many girls simply could not handle the pressure, prompting a tearful Chelsea to desperately beg her not to say such things. Staring distantly into the past, Maeve somberly recounts how the vicious rumors of her unrelenting severity rapidly spread, causing the prestigious noble families to completely stop requesting her specialized tutoring services. High society continuously whispered cruel tales that her traumatized students constantly fled in tears, entirely convinced that the once respected Duchess Maeve was merely bullying the young ladies under the false guise of elite education. Overcome by the relentless, suffocating wave of societal backlash, the usually unshakable woman admits she eventually started to genuinely believe that she was simply never meant to be a teacher at all. Looking affectionately at her heavily weeping pupil, Maeve warmly smiles and notes that it has been an incredibly long time since she encountered a student as exceptionally tough and thoroughly worth teaching as Chelsea. Fired up by a sudden surge of overwhelming, fierce gratitude, Chelsea wildly clenches her fists and loudly vows to prove to the entirety of high society just how undeniably amazing Duchess Maeve truly is at the upcoming tea party. Tears streaming uncontrollably down her flushed face, the young noblewoman passionately shouts that Maeve's unwavering belief in her through every single failure ensured her profound lessons finally, permanently got through to her. Deeply moved by the girl's fiery, unyielding loyalty, the Duchess widens her eyes in shock before gently accepting just the single rose, firmly reminding a stunned Chelsea that she already possesses incredible strengths as a future leader. Suddenly realizing the sheer, embarrassing intensity of her emotional outburst, Chelsea furiously blushes and awkwardly steps back, sheepishly wondering if she just got completely carried away once again. Holding the delicate flower affectionately close to her chest with a genuinely radiant smile, Duchess Maeve softly chuckles and expresses her immense, heartfelt anticipation for Chelsea's grand debut. Completely breaking the tender, emotional silence, the surrounding maids joyfully erupt into loud squeals, excitedly teasing their deeply flustered lady that her genuine smile is absolutely adorable. The fateful day of the royal tea party finally arrives as a luxurious, heavily guarded horse-drawn carriage dramatically rolls toward the towering, majestic castle coming clearly into view. Clutching her feather quill in a sudden, vivid flashback, Chelsea nervously recalls her mentor's strict warning that both Crown Prince Valentino, a frequent subject of her secret diary, and second Prince Theodore will definitely be attending the grand event. Inside the opulent waiting room, an arrogant nobleman proudly tells Jennifer she is a spectacular daughter they can display anywhere, taking a remarkably cruel jab at Chelsea while the incredibly nervous younger sister trembles beside him. Masterfully ignoring the highly toxic family dynamics, Chelsea centers her racing mind by focusing entirely on the most critical lesson of projecting absolute self-assurance radiating outward from deep within the heart. Taking a remarkably deep, fortifying breath, she mentally anchors herself tightly to Duchess Maeve's core teachings, thoroughly preparing to unleash her fully refined persona upon the unforgiving noble society. Silently repeating her mentor's final, heavily empowering mantra that she is the undisputed main character of this grand stage, Chelsea gracefully steps out of the carriage with flawlessly poised confidence. Emerging radiantly into the bright sunlight, she thoroughly stuns the entire grand courtyard in a breathtaking, meticulously tailored dress beautifully adorned with intricate floral details and a striking, elegant black bow. The surrounding crowd of elite nobles instantly freezes in their tracks, completely paralyzed by the awe-inspiring, overwhelming vision of pure elegance stepping gracefully before them. A hushed, heavily stunned silence immediately falls over the aristocratic crowd as mesmerized onlookers desperately whisper amongst themselves, loudly wondering if they have ever seen such a truly beautiful lady grace their hallowed halls before. Basking effortlessly in the overwhelming public attention with a serene, wildly confident smile, she easily sparks frantic gossip as the mesmerized elites struggle intensely to identify exactly which prestigious noble house she represents. The swift narrative abruptly flashes back to earlier that exact morning, revealing a heavily bewildered Chelsea staring in pure confusion at a brand new, highly exquisite garment placed neatly before her. Overcome with absolute paralyzing shock, the young lady gasps incredibly loudly upon finally realizing the sheer magnificent quality and astonishing detail of the stunning dress. Beaming brightly with undeniable, swelling pride, the highly dedicated maids excitedly announce that they personally tailored this breathtaking gown specifically for their beloved lady's grand societal debut. Holding the gorgeous, heavily flowing fabric carefully up against her body, Chelsea's wide eyes sparkle with pure, unfiltered joy as she happily declares how unbelievably cute the incredible design is. The visual focus shifts tightly to the maid's heavily bandaged fingers, a brilliant, silent testament to their grueling midnight labor fueled by a sincere hope that this magnificent dress will help Lady Chelsea finally enjoy herself. Working tirelessly through the freezing, unforgiving night, the fiercely devoted servants expertly stitched every single seam by the dim, flickering glow of a solitary lamp, pouring their unwavering loyalty into the very fabric itself. Bursting violently into intensely grateful tears, an overwhelmed Chelsea fiercely thanks her exceptionally loyal friends for the incredible gift, while the crying maids warmly reply that seeing her this unbelievably happy is exactly why they poured their beating hearts into it. Returning sharply to the dazzling, high-stakes present, Chelsea proudly struts in her friend's brilliant masterpiece, while a furiously jealous rival violently glares at the intricate details of Nelchan and Lily Nyan's stunning handmade dress. Striding arrogantly and aggressively forward, Damien Lunand coldly scolds Chelsea for her lateness, ruthlessly warning her not to embarrass the family since they must formally greet His Majesty together as unified siblings. Smugly redirecting his hollow praise, Damien loudly boasts that all aristocratic eyes are naturally fixed upon his admirable little sister Jennifer, who expertly feigns a delicate, bashful embarrassment for the eager, watching crowd. Approaching the towering, heavily gilded throne, Chelsea mentally braces herself as the overwhelmingly intimidating, uniquely powerful aura of a true monarch bears heavily down upon the grand hall. Strictly following the exceptionally rigid royal protocol permanently burned into her mind by Duchess Maeve, the siblings carefully line up to formally present their deepest, most reverent respects to the imposing king. Standing incredibly nervously in the absolute royal presence, Chelsea suddenly blinks in sheer, unadulterated astonishment as her wide eyes lock directly onto the striking, intensely handsome figure standing confidently beside the throne. Gasping sharply internally as she finally recognizes the legendary royal brothers in person, her racing heart skips a massive beat when Crown Prince Valentino suddenly shoots her a charming, highly unexpected wink. Entirely oblivious to the quiet royal exchange, the surrounding nobles continue to fiercely whisper their absolute, unfettered awe, completely mesmerized by Chelsea's model-like beauty while offering only passing, obligatory compliments to her seething sister. The grand, sprawling stone arches of the incredibly opulent royal ballroom loom silently overhead, dramatically framing the incredibly high-stakes social battlefield rapidly unfolding far below. Executing a flawlessly practiced, deeply respectful bow, Damien formally thanks the king for the grand invitation, closely followed by a stuttering Jennifer and finally a perfectly composed, powerfully confident introduction from Chelsea herself. Curtsying with an undeniable, completely breathtaking grace that instantly commands the entire room's absolute attention, she flashes a radiantly polite smile and boldly declares it is truly an immense honor to make their royal acquaintance. Deeply impressed by her utterly flawless execution, the stoic king firmly commands Chelsea to show her face more often, while a highly intrigued Prince Valentino silently, happily praises her truly exquisite greeting. Under the piercing gaze of Her Majesty the Queen, Chelsea realizes it isn't half as terrifying as Lady Maeve's stare. The regal queen leans against her ornate throne and offers a gentle, warm smile. An onlooker remarks on House Lunen's impressive young mistress while marveling at her delicate floral hair ornament. The royal couple beams with delight, complimenting her unusual but lovely dress adorned with real flowers that stands out from popular styles. Bowing gracefully, she expresses her honor at their praise, explaining she prioritized elegance over fashion to avoid disrespecting Her Majesty. While outwardly crediting the head gardener for the flowers, she inwardly panics that they won't stop talking to her despite her teacher's strict one- or two-word rule. The royals eagerly press on, demanding to know where she learned such exquisite manners and her perfectly executed curtsy. A bespectacled young man and a blonde girl gasp in absolute shock as the name Duchess Maeve is suddenly brought up. Radiating cheerful confidence, Chelsea proudly declares to the Queen that she had the distinct privilege of learning directly from Duchess Maeve. The Queen looks visibly taken aback, marveling that the girl received instruction from the Duchess herself. Chelsea continues her glowing testimony, highlighting the countless lessons and sheer kindness the Duchess bestowed upon her. Sweating slightly, the Queen admits she is acquainted with her grace and assumes the tutelage must have been intensely rigorous. Comprehension dawns on the Queen's face as she softly murmurs her understanding. While Chelsea mentally celebrates praising her teacher in front of everyone, someone suddenly grabs her shoulder from behind. The angry bespectacled boy demands to know who she thinks she is, furiously claiming that Jennifer was supposed to be the one speaking. Glaring fiercely, the boy coldly demands the meaning of her sudden interruption. He fiercely insists that their majesties actually wanted to speak with Jennifer, leaving Chelsea utterly baffled. Calling him Anieth, Chelsea calmly tries to stop him, but he furiously accuses her of shamelessly butting in and ruining everything. Chelsea maintains her stoic composure, internally noting that she can easily endure this level of cruelty. The surrounding crowd whispers about how the usually quiet and unnoticed Chelsea was finally shining for once. Concerned onlookers murmur among themselves, noting that arguing in such a public venue is absolutely disastrous. Startled by the commotion, Chelsea turns slightly and questions the word cruelty as the crowd's anxious chatter swells around her. Damien violently screams at her to never call him brother, viciously branding her a sickening failure who has no right to his name. Chelsea calmly defends her honor by stating she told no falsehoods, but Damien instantly accuses her of lying just to steal a moment in the Queen's spotlight. Damien screams that no one has ever seen the Duchess near House Lunend, oblivious to the fact that Chelsea's teacher strictly demanded secrecy. Chelsea's demeanor shifts into a dark glare as she openly wonders how their father would react if he learned of this scene. With icy precision, she reminds Damien that the entire royal assembly is currently witnessing him hurl unprovoked abuse at her. Completely enraged by her calm defiance, Damien raises his hand and violently lunges at her as the surrounding ladies shriek in terror. Barking at her to shut up, Damien viciously accuses her of tarnishing the marquisite's standing as House Lunen's heir. Instead of striking her face, Damien violently rips the beautiful jeweled bow right off the front of her carefully crafted dress. Chelsea is frozen in absolute shock, her eyes wide as the remnants of her ruined dress flutter around her, The decorative beads clatter against the marble floor as Chelsea stares blankly at her torn dress. A sudden flashback reveals her loyal maids noting the dress's cute but plain color while Chelsea happily admired the fabric. Her dedicated maids had worked tirelessly through the night, cutting, sewing, and agonizing over every single detail to make it perfect. Remembering their exhausted dark circles, Chelsea had tearfully thanked them for their hard work and promised to treasure their gift. Snapping back to the cruel reality, Damien mocks her as a pathetic failure who can't even keep decent clothes intact. With utter disdain, he casually tosses the ripped, pathetic bow onto the cold floor. The noblewomen in the crowd cover their mouths with their fans, deeply disgusted by how vulgar the entire display has become. Gripping her ruined dress, Chelsea desperately fights back tears, reminding herself of the strict rule that a lady must never weep publicly. The memory of her maids wishing she would find even a little joy completely breaks her resolve, driving her to her knees in sorrow. As she kneels defeated on the floor, an unknown voice suddenly calls out her name. Her strict composure finally shatters entirely as thick tears stream down her devastated face. Suddenly, a stranger gently drapes an elegant, heavy coat over her trembling shoulders to hide her ruined dress. A handsome, light-haired young man steps smoothly in front of the shocked Damien and softly asks Chelsea if she is all right. Damien freezes in sheer panic, aggressively stammering as he demands to know who this newcomer is. Flashing a dazzling, reassuring smile, the handsome savior securely holds his coat around her and repeats his gentle question. He protectively pulls her close against his chest, leaving the tearful Chelsea completely stunned and blushing. While Damien furiously screams for his identity, the mysterious man completely ignores him to ask if Chelsea can stand. Realizing the stranger is intentionally using his coat to hide her tear-stained face from the crowd, Chelsea leans into his comforting embrace. As he gently pats her shoulder, she breathes in his calming, refreshing mint scent and finally feels a sliver of safety. Stepping into the tense atmosphere, the dashing young man confidently declares his intention to quiet the sudden commotion while demanding to know exactly what is going on. Jennifer desperately introduces herself, completely ignored as a panicked Damien recognizes the newcomer as Prince Valentino and tries to excuse himself. Flashing a desperate smile, Jennifer forcefully introduces herself as Jennifer Lunand while proudly proclaiming that she has always deeply admired the prince. The prince's piercing, stoic eyes narrow slightly as he coldly assesses the chaotic scene unfolding before him. Peeking out from beneath the protective coat, a stunned Chelsea immediately recognizes the defining features of her savior, realizing exactly who this person is. She realizes with breathless awe that the man standing before her is Prince Valentino, the very same figure who has appeared in her diary countless times. Overwhelmed by the surreal moment, she finds herself completely captivated by the striking beauty of his gentle pink eyes. The prince's sharp gaze immediately falls upon Chelsea's ruined attire, noticing that the exquisite dress she wears has been violently torn like a fragile gemstone. Turning his chilling glare toward the trembling Damien, the prince demands to know who would dare commit such a violent, barbaric act in a formal public setting. Sweating profusely under the royal's intense scrutiny, Damien nervously attempts to dismiss the horrific assault as just a little accident. Unmoved by the pathetic excuse, Prince Valentino coldly points out that it distinctly looked as though Damien had intentionally raised his hand against Lady Chelsea. The prince presses further, questioning what exactly Damien disliked so much, especially considering Chelsea had just flawlessly impressed their majesties with a splendid greeting. Stumbling over his words, the desperate, bespectacled boy stammers that Chelsea had merely tried to capture their majesty's attention by shamelessly lying. Damien arrogantly claims that Chelsea tried to disgrace the Lunand Marquis family with complete nonsense by falsely stating she was taught by the esteemed Duchess Maeve. The surrounding noblewomen gasp and whisper among themselves, agreeing that no ordinary lady could withstand Duchess Maeve's brutal training and concluding that Chelsea's claim must be a lie. Damien's smug confidence shatters into pure shock as an unexpected rebuttal halts his slanderous tirade. With unwavering authority, the prince publicly defends Chelsea by firmly declaring that her statement is not a lie and she is speaking the absolute truth. Prince Valentino completely destroys Damien's argument by revealing he heard directly from Kendall, Duchess Maeve's own son, that Chelsea was receiving personal guidance from her. Jennifer's perfectly crafted facade violently shatters as she screams internally, utterly horrified and enraged that her unremarkable sister received such a prestigious honor. Gently taking Chelsea's trembling hand in his own, the prince warmly remarks that hearing about her dedicated efforts was incredibly fascinating. Offering a genuinely tender smile, Prince Valentino confesses that he had been eagerly looking forward to finally meeting her today. The fickle crowd instantly changes their tune, with the gossiping ladies eagerly agreeing that if His Highness says so, her magnificent conduct must be true. Turning his icy, disappointed profile back to the sweating Damien, the prince coldly demands to know what kind of abysmal education the Lunand Marquis provided to him. Highlighting the blatant hypocrisy, he points out Damien's obvious fondness for Lady Jennifer while condemning his inexplicably harsh and cruel treatment of Lady Chelsea. Delivering the final, crushing verbal blow, Prince Valentino openly questions Damien's sense of dignity, leaving the boy utterly humiliated before the entire royal court. Damien stands completely frozen in silent terror, his face pale as the immense weight of the prince's public condemnation crushes his arrogant pride. Swiftly managing the aftermath, the prince orders a nearby servant to pick up the broken dress parts, a command that is instantly understood and obeyed. While Chelsea sorrowfully mourns the precious dress crafted by Nelchi and Lilinine, the prince gently advises her that she should change out of the ruined garment. Guiding her away from the suffocating stares of the judgmental crowd, the prince extends his hand and leads Lady Chelsea toward a more secluded area. Bringing her into a quiet, elegantly furnished room, he gently reassures her that no one comes here and she doesn't need to hold her emotions in anymore. Clutching her tattered, ruined dress, Chelsea initially struggles to process the surreal kindness she is being shown, thinking it to be completely impossible. The prince watches her with a bright, encouraging smile, patiently giving her the safe space she needs to release her pent-up distress. Instead of weeping delicately, Chelsea erupts into a violent tantrum, screaming about how unfair it is and violently cursing the jerks who ruined Nelchi and Lilinine's hard work. Her furious wails of absolute rage echo wildly, shaking the very window panes as she vehemently denounces her abusers as complete idiots. Having collapsed onto the floor in sheer exhaustion from her unladylike rant, she pants heavily while the prince casually sits nearby and asks if she has calmed down. A silent moment passes as Chelsea sits on the floor, blinking in dazed confusion as her racing thoughts begin to settle. Glancing back at the elegantly dressed young man, sheer panic sets in as she suddenly remembers that the person witnessing her monstrous tantrum is actually the prince. A horrifying vision of a bad end flashes before her eyes as she realizes her vulgar rant will undoubtedly reach the ears of both the Queen and the strict Duchess Maeve. Trembling with impending doom, Chelsea internally screams that this disastrous situation has escalated into something dangerously bad. Uttering a pathetic, defeated groan, she completely gives up on her dignity and collapses against the nearest piece of furniture. Throwing herself into a desperate, prostrating bow on the floor, she tearfully begs the prince not to report her disgraceful behavior to their majesties or Duchess Maeve. Flushed bright red with absolute mortification, she clutches her throbbing head in agony while the prince watches her dramatic flailing with mild surprise. Unable to hold it back any longer, Prince Valentino completely breaks his royal composure and bursts into a fit of genuine, hearty laughter. Chelsea stares up at him with wide, sparkling eyes, completely mesmerized by the unguarded joy radiating from the normally composed royal. Still wiping tears of mirth from his eyes, the prince apologizes for laughing so much, while Chelsea marvels at how totally different he seems from his earlier stoic persona. Catching his breath, Valentino smiles warmly and remarks that she has really changed her image, acting like a completely different person from when they previously met. Chelsea frantically stammers that she has worked hard to improve, assuming he doesn't believe her, but the prince gently clarifies that wasn't what he meant. Looking down at her with profound fondness, he softly notes that despite the changes, she is still exactly as kind as she ever was. With delicate decorative flowers floating playfully in the atmosphere, he extends a graceful hand to help her up and asks if she can stand. Grasping his hand, Chelsea looks up at him with deep gratitude and sincerely thanks him for saving her back at the venue. Expressing intense gratitude, someone promises not to tell their mother and plans to report to Duchess Maeve that the response was absolutely perfect. Staring wide-eyed at the ornate ribbon presented to her, she realizes how much she owes the person holding it. Praising her performance, the boy chuckles while she nervously admits she almost broke down sobbing and caused a massive scene just as a knock interrupts them. Granting them permission to enter, Prince Valentino welcomes the maids who eagerly announce that the new dress is finally ready. Considering a yellowish color, Valentino instructs the maid to also ask for Lady Chelsea's preferences, which the servant promptly acknowledges. Caught completely off guard by the sudden attention, Chelsea reacts with wide-eyed shock. Flustered by the overwhelming treatment, Chelsea weakly protests that it is too much as the maids gently usher her forward. Mesmerized by the sparkling jewelry, she nervously stammers that she couldn't possibly accept such pretty things while the maids giggle warmly. Leaving the prince in charge of the remaining details, the servant departs and firmly clicks the door shut behind them. Sitting quietly as the maids attend to her, Chelsea reevaluates her assumptions and admits she expected princes to be far more arrogant and selfish. Thinking fondly of her own maids, Nelchi and Lilinen, she listens as a servant asks for permission to remove the fresh flowers to redo her hair. Beaming with radiant gratitude, Chelsea enthusiastically thanks the smiling maid who cheerfully offers to fix her makeup next. Reflecting on her rescue, she realizes how incredibly gentlemanly and kind Prince Valentino had been toward her during the entire ordeal. Relaxing with a fresh cup of tea, Valentino is interrupted by a sharp knock and an announcement that all preparations are now complete. Lowering her gaze in quiet remorse, Chelsea realizes she still needs to apologize to the two people she inconvenienced. Staring downward with a heavy heart, she expresses deep guilt over having to borrow such an outrageously gorgeous dress. Turning his head, Valentino stares in stunned silence as he takes in her breathtaking new appearance. Breaking the quiet tension, Valentino praises her by saying the dress looks wonderful on her, prompting her sincere thanks. The sharp clack of a shoe stepping forward suddenly grabs their attention as a newcomer named Kendall approaches. Turning her beautifully adorned self toward the newcomer, Chelsea blinks in confusion as Valentino asks Kendall for his honest opinion. Bowing with a polite smile, the man introduces himself as Kendall Maeve, causing Chelsea to freeze as she mentally connects his prestigious name. Trembling in internal panic upon realizing he is Duchess Maeve's son, she listens as Kendall casually mentions hearing about her from his mother. Instantly activating her refined lady mode, Chelsea curtsies perfectly and declares it an absolute honor to make Lord Kendall Maeve's acquaintance. Observing the unusual dynamic, Kendall notes how rare it is for Valentino to speak so much, while Valentino bitterly complains about someone's unacceptable behavior. Handing over a teacup, Kendall sympathetically remarks that it sounds like they had an incredibly rough time earlier. Connecting the dots, Kendall asks if this disastrous situation is what Valentino meant when he promised his mother he would prove his family wrong. Scowling in deep disgust, Valentino explains how Damien ruthlessly blames Chelsea while doting on the other sister, even going so far as to raise his hand against her. A heavy, suffocating silence settles over the room as Chelsea sits rigidly between the two brooding young men. Slamming his cup down in sudden fury, Kendall erupts and shouts that he is seriously frustrated just hearing about the situation. Pacing angrily as the memory boils his blood again, Kendall tells Lady Chelsea to feel completely free to relax in front of them without worrying at all. Attempting to comfort the anxious girl, he warmly points out that even her own maids clearly adore her. Firing up at the mention of Nelchi and Lilinen, Chelsea passionately declares how incredibly hard they worked to make her original dress. After someone mistakenly asks if those unique names belong to a shop, Chelsea firmly clarifies that they are actually her beloved maids. Surprising the confused girl, Valentino casually volunteers to take full responsibility for repairing her damaged dress. Offering a gentle, reassuring smile, he hopes that fixing her ruined clothes will help lift her shattered spirits. Leaning forward with sparkling eyes, Chelsea gasps loudly and asks if he is truly serious about fixing her precious dress. Moved to her core by his unexpected kindness, she silently reflects that her own terrible family had made her believe all nobles were inherently scary. Giving his absolute word, Valentino promises to have the dress fully repaired and personally delivered back to the Linen estate. Worshipping him with starry eyes and asking if he is a god, Chelsea leaves Valentino blushing as Kendall dryly notes the prince's sudden ascension to divinity. Changing the subject, Kendall casually mentions that he saw the Lunan siblings leaving the grounds by carriage on his way over. Pulling out a decorative pocket watch, Kendall asks when they should head back to the main hall, prompting Valentino to agree that it is finally time. Before they depart, a poised maid approaches Chelsea to inform her that one of her former students is also attending the tea party. Smiling warmly with a sense of nostalgia, the maid politely asks Chelsea to greet this mysterious former student if they happen to cross paths. Relaying the heartfelt request, Chelsea politely states that she would absolutely love to greet the noble lady named Susanna if possible. Hearing that highly specific name, Valentino touches his chin in surprise and repeats the name Susanna with a deeply troubled expression. Clasping her hands together in bright anticipation, Chelsea eagerly asks the nervous prince exactly what kind of person Lady Susanna is. Explaining that Susanna is actually his cousin, Valentino graciously offers to introduce them, making Chelsea beam with pure gratitude. The narrative suddenly drops a massive bombshell, revealing that Susanna Surlies is not just his cousin, but also Prince Valentino's fiancée. Chelsea stares blankly ahead in total shock as the sheer weight of this romantic revelation completely shatters her joyful momentum. As the chapter draws to a dramatic close, Valentino averts his gaze while the heavy reality of his engagement to Susanna Surlies hangs suffocatingly in the air. Chelsea stares in wide-eyed shock, mentally reeling as she digests the fact that these people are nobles. The mere mention of the word fiancé leaves her completely stunned and speechless. Glancing sideways with a serious expression, Kendall promptly clarifies that she is actually a former fiancé. Overwhelmed by this aristocratic drama, Chelsea nervously touches her face and thinks that a world where people have fiancés sounds incredibly tough to navigate. Chelsea marvels at how handsome, kind, and princely Valentino is, completely understanding why noble ladies flock to him. Meanwhile, Valentino casually waves his hand and explains that he and Susanna are just childhood friends whose engagement was called off a while ago. Standing completely frozen in place, Chelsea blanks out with question marks floating above her head. Her wide, unblinking eyes stare into space as she struggles to process the sudden influx of complicated noble relationships. Leaning in close, Valentino calls her name and continues his thought, startling Chelsea out of her deep trance. She flinches with a panicked gasp, screaming internally because she completely failed to listen to a single word he just said. Looking at her with a soft, earnest expression, the handsome prince firmly declares his intentions. He humbly admits that he would genuinely like to get to know her much better. Gazing up into his striking eyes, Chelsea listens as he gently proposes a new starting point for their relationship. He warmly asks if the two of them could start by simply being friends. Staring blankly ahead in absolute bewilderment, Chelsea quietly repeats the word friends to herself. Her mind short-circuits as she tries to comprehend a royal prince asking for her friendship. Gripping her hair in a silent, frantic panic, Chelsea mentally screams for a teacher to tell her how to handle such an unprecedented situation. She frantically questions how an ordinary girl like her is supposed to respond to a royal prince suddenly asking for her friendship. Smiling gently, Valentino acknowledges they must maintain formalities in public but requests that she speak to him casually without honorifics when they are alone. When she nervously questions if that is truly allowed, he leans in with a teasing smile and asks if it is forbidden. Flushed and overwhelmed by his charming demeanor, Chelsea silently squeals over how incredibly cute he is. She struggles to contain her racing heart under his intense, dazzling gaze. Lighting up with a radiant smile, Valentino gratefully grasps both of her hands in a warm embrace. He joyfully declares that with her big smile, they are officially friends from this day forward. Throwing caution to the wind, Chelsea enthusiastically agrees with a bright, cheerful shout. She internally decides that if this is wrong, she will simply accept whatever harsh scolding comes her way later. Chuckling warmly at their wholesome exchange, Kendall happily raises his hand to join in the fun. He cheerfully volunteers to drop all formal honorifics with her as well. Readily accepting the relaxed atmosphere, Kendall asks if it is all right to casually call her Chelsea. He waits for her permission with an easygoing, friendly smile. Gently taking her hand in a gesture of newly minted friendship, Kendall warmly thanks her. He solidifies their new bond by sincerely calling her by her first name. Pointing a finger in sudden inspiration, Chelsea eagerly asks if she can call them Tino and Ken. Meanwhile, her mental avatar stands with crossed arms, internally buffering as she processes her own bold audacity. Pumping her fists with starry-eyed excitement, she justifies the adorable nicknames by comparing them to her maids, Nelchi and Lilinayan. The boys look on in slight bemusement at her incredibly casual and unique naming sense. As Valentino and Kendall happily accept their new casual nicknames, a sudden, sharp knock rattles the door. Valentino reassures her that she no longer needs to use the formal sama with him just as Chelsea turns in confusion. Valentino's playful demeanor instantly vanishes, replaced by a sharp, serious glare. He addresses the new arrival directly by uttering the name Theodore as Chelsea watches in surprise. The young boy addresses Valentino as brother and politely reports that several attendees at the venue wish to greet him. He formally excuses his interruption while standing respectfully in the doorway. Smiling pleasantly, Valentino graciously thanks his younger brother for going out of his way to fetch them. Theodore humbly dismisses the praise, bowing his head in quiet deference. Observing the beautiful, feminine features of the second prince, Chelsea blushes and internally screams about how incredibly cute he is. She admires Theodore's delicate appearance, completely enchanted by his girl-like charm. Snapping back to reality, Chelsea immediately flips her internal switch to activate her flawless lady mode. She instantly straightens her posture and adopts a mask of refined, aristocratic elegance. Placing a gentle hand on her back, Valentino confidently introduces Chelsea Lunand to his stunned brother. Theodore stares in utter shock, completely flabbergasted that his esteemed brother has suddenly made a new friend. Turning his attention back to the maids, Valentino courteously asks if it is finally time to return to the main venue. The maids smile warmly in agreement, signaling the end of their private respite. Maintaining her perfect aristocratic composure, Chelsea respectfully bows and tells Prince Theodore that it is an absolute pleasure to meet him. The young prince stammers a nervous but polite greeting in return. The grand double doors open to reveal a breathtakingly opulent hallway adorned with massive, sparkling chandeliers and towering archways. The magnificent architecture serves as a stunning backdrop as the royal group makes their highly anticipated return. As the group steps into the lavish hall, a sudden wave of frantic murmuring ripples through the elegantly dressed crowd. The nobility turns their heads in unison, immediately noticing the unexpected arrival. Descending the grand staircase like a vision from a fairy tale, Prince Valentino gracefully escorts Chelsea by the hand. Kendall and Prince Theodore trail closely behind, forming an incredibly powerful and striking entourage. The surrounding nobles erupt into hushed, shocked gossip, demanding to know why both Royal Highnesses and Duke Maeve's son are escorting this mysterious girl. Whispers spread like wildfire as attendees recognize her as the young lady from earlier. In a secluded, ornate pavilion, two high-ranking noblewomen sit gracefully at a tea table amidst the swirling rumors. One delicately sips her tea, projecting an aura of cool, untouchable elegance while observing the commotion. The narrative centers on a stunning young woman with sharp, piercing eyes and flawless features. This cool beauty is none other than Susanna, watching the grand entrance with an unreadable, stoic expression. Approaching the table with a smooth stride, Kendall asks for a moment of her time. Susanna calmly acknowledges his presence, addressing him formally yet fondly as her dear brother. The gossiping crowd quickly identifies the seated beauty as Susanna Celis, Prince Valentino's famous former fiancée. Their burning curiosity immediately shifts to Chelsea, intensely wondering who this new girl could possibly be. Gesturing elegantly with an outstretched hand, Susanna invites Chelsea to take a seat at her table. Chelsea formally introduces herself as Susanna acknowledges that she has already heard about her through Duchess Maeve. Standing behind Chelsea like a loyal guardian, Valentino watches the interaction with a brilliantly proud and reassuring smile. His warm, protective presence gives Chelsea the courage she needs to face the daunting noblewoman. Graciously wishing them an enjoyable tea party, Valentino announces that he and Kendall are heading off to greet the other guests. Chelsea politely thanks the prince as the boys step away to mingle. Left completely alone with the intimidating beauty, Chelsea stares across the table with wide, nervous eyes. Susanna continues to hold her fan gracefully, her intense aura making Chelsea sweat with anxiety. Swallowing her mounting nervousness, Chelsea respectfully addresses the noblewoman as Susanna-sama. She trembles slightly under Susanna's piercing gaze, bracing herself for whatever the former fiancé might say. Observing the profound silence, Chelsea internally concludes that Susanna must still hold romantic feelings for Tino. She logically notes that the two of them look incredibly perfect together, radiating a matching regal aura. Unable to bear the crushing tension of the surrounding gossip, a nearby noble girl frantically scurries away. She awkwardly suggests to her friend that they should immediately go pick some flowers elsewhere. The relentless whispering continues as nobles recall old rumors about Susanna being groomed to become the next queen. They openly question why Susanna is now sitting with the strange girl escorted by the crown prince. Sweating profusely under the weight of 100 staring eyes, Chelsea internally groans about the suffocatingly awkward atmosphere. She desperately wishes she could escape the heavy, dramatic tension radiating throughout the room. Analyzing her features, Chelsea notes that Susanna has a highly unapproachable, cool beauty vibe. However, she suddenly realizes that Susanna's face bears a striking, uncanny resemblance to her own friend Carrara's bestie, Lovechan. Breaking the ice with a genuine, bright smile, Chelsea boldly compliments Lady Susanna on her truly beautiful grace. She warmly admits that sitting with her feels surprisingly nostalgic, catching Susanna completely off guard. Snapping her fan shut with dramatic intensity, Susanna leans forward with burning, shadowed eyes. She aggressively questions if Chelsea is actually His Highness Valentino's new fiancée. Frantically waving her hands, Chelsea loudly denies the accusation and insists it is absolutely not true. Susanna quickly counters by pointing out that Chelsea was staring intently at the prince earlier, assuming she liked him. Leaning across the table behind the privacy of her fan, Susanna completely drops her icy facade to whisper a shocking secret. She blushes heavily and confesses that she actually harbors deep romantic feelings for the second prince, Theodore. With a flustered expression, Susanna frantically tries to clear the air between them. She explicitly clarifies that her arranged engagement to His Highness Valentino was officially annulled a very long time ago. Sweating nervously, the woman admits she never got along well with His Highness Valentino. She fondly imagines Prince Theodore, calling him an absolute angel. The surrounding noblewomen murmur amongst themselves, gossiping excitedly about how emotional and well-suited the pair must be. Shocked whispers ripple through the crowd as they question why she cannot be queen instead, favoring Prince Theodore over Valentino. They quietly agree that a sweet prince like Theodore deserves a cute lady to reign as his queen. Stepping forward to defend her, a blonde girl passionately protests that the rumors simply are not true. She gently clasps the other woman's hands in a sincere, silent display of solidarity. Smiling brightly, Susanna offers her unwavering support and reminds her how wonderful she truly is. Staring back with wide eyes, Chelsea internally struggles to determine if Susanna's sincere gaze is genuine or mere flattery. Returning the warmth, she eagerly expresses her desire to learn more about Susanna. A soft, graceful chuckle escapes her lips as the tension finally begins to melt away. Overcome with happy tears, Chelsea warmly accepts Susanna's request to visit her home. A swirling, ethereal haze surrounds her mind as the joyful memories begin to blur into a magical transition. Resting inside the carriage, Chelsea smiles to herself and reflects on what a fun, eventful day it was. She gratefully notes that Valentino is a truly good person for preparing a carriage for her after Damien and Jennifer abandoned her. Stretching her arms with delight, she celebrates the fact that she even managed to get along with Susanna. A contented sigh escapes her as she listens to the rhythmic tapping of the carriage wheels. Gazing out the window at the distant castle, an inner voice notes how much Chelsea must have liked Valentino. The true soul inside the body realizes that she, originally named Carrara, is somehow becoming friends with Tino. A mysterious, ornate mirror suddenly materializes within the misty depths of her consciousness. Carrara calls out into the void, wondering where the real Chelsea is and what she thinks about all this. Her eyes widen in sheer shock as a voice calls out her original name from the ether. Time seemingly freezes as Carrara finds herself sitting face to face with the original Chelsea inside the ghostly carriage. The real Chelsea offers a gentle, reassuring smile that carries a heavy weight of unspoken sorrow. Carrara stares back in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the impossible phantom sitting before her. The phantom Chelsea gently reaches out, explaining that they have somehow merged together into one being. Jolting backward in a panic, Carrara frantically asks if the apparition is the real Chelsea. Casting her eyes downward in sorrow, the spirit quietly confirms her identity. The spirit softly explains the bizarre truth, stating that they are both Carrara and Chelsea simultaneously. Gripping her dress with trembling hands, Chelsea apologizes for being too weak to handle her life. Tears stream down her face as she sobs, confessing that she forced all of her unbearable pain onto Carrara. A sudden, agonizing headache strikes Carrara in the waking world, leaving her groaning as foreign memories flood her mind. The ethereal mirror separating their souls begins to fracture as Chelsea weeps helplessly. Pressing her forehead against the glass, Chelsea promises that Carrara will understand everything in due time. The mystical vision abruptly shatters as a servant's voice calls out from outside the carriage. Blinking away her confusion, Carrara gasps and wonders if the emotional encounter was merely a dream. A polite butler opens the carriage door, announcing their safe arrival at the Lunind estate. Still shaken by the vision, she quietly thanks the driver and steps out into the crisp night air. A sudden, harsh shout of her name interrupts her thoughts, immediately reminding her of the pain the real Chelsea mentioned. An imposing man blocks her path, furiously demanding to know why she stayed out so late. Peeking from behind their father, Jennifer flashes a malicious, triumphant smirk at her returning sister. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Her father coldly declares that she is completely unfit for socializing. A woman fiercely glares at Carrara, scolding her for bringing immense shame to the proud Lunand Marquis family. He ruthlessly cuts off any chance of defense, stating he already heard the entire story from Damien and Jennifer. Desperately confused, Carrara pleads her innocence, but her father outright refuses to listen to her excuses. Turning his back in absolute disgust, he treats his own daughter with sheer contempt. He viciously accuses her of publicly harassing a tearful Jennifer and violently retaliating against her peers. Lightning seems to crackle in the air as Carrara stands her ground, fiercely denying the fabricated lies involving Damien. Her defiant tone only further enrages the patriarch, his glasses glinting with unrelenting fury. Refusing to back down from the abuse, Carrara sharply calls out to her father in a final stand for justice. Bursting into the room with malicious intent, Jennifer dramatically accuses Chelsea of throwing herself onto Prince Valentino. Standing her ground with unyielding resolve, Chelsea flatly denies the scandalous accusation while maintaining her composed posture. Narrowing her eyes with a spiteful glare, Jennifer aggressively points out that her sister is wearing a completely different dress than she was this morning. Her father furiously demands to know if she thinks she can escape with lies, while Chelsea internally laments that her family blindly believes Jennifer without ever listening to her side of the story. Sighing dramatically, her stepmother furiously scolds Chelsea and questions if she truly understands the magnitude of the disgrace she has caused. Gesturing aggressively toward her, the patriarch strictly warns his daughter that there were plenty of witnesses present who saw her cause trouble. Unfazed by their hostility, Chelsea calmly reveals that it was actually Prince Valentino who came to her rescue after Lord Damien publicly insulted her and tore her dress. Staring in sheer panic, Jennifer recoils and sweats nervously as she realizes her malicious lies are rapidly unraveling before her very eyes. Continuing her flawless defense, Chelsea casually explains that His Highness personally provided her with a new gown and graciously arranged for her torn dress to be repaired. The staggering revelation regarding the royal family leaves her hostile parents utterly paralyzed in stunned, speechless disbelief. Looking down with quiet, dignified resolve, Chelsea firmly states that her unbelievable story is the absolute truth. Sweating profusely in a desperate panic, Jennifer frantically changes her story by claiming the dress tore by accident when Chelsea tried to steal attention, weaving in a fabricated detail about Duchess Maeve teaching her manners. Pointing an accusatory finger with tears in her eyes, Jennifer hysterically screams that the entire disaster is completely Chelsea's fault for lying to them. A heavy, suffocating silence violently blankets the parlor as the family slowly processes the sheer weight of Jennifer's frantic, contradictory outburst. Completely ignoring Jennifer's hysterical tears, the stepmother stammers in absolute shock as she fixates entirely on the sudden mention of the prestigious Duchess Maeve. The narrative highlights Duchess Maeve as a fiercely strict, highly respected figure in high society whose flawless reputation is personally acknowledged by Her Majesty the Queen. Trembling with newfound anxiety, her stepmother cautiously asks Chelsea if the staggering claim about training under Duchess Maeve is actually true. Closing her eyes with breathtaking elegance, Chelsea calmly confirms that she was indeed personally instructed by the esteemed Duchess. She boldly invites her flabbergasted family to verify the claim themselves, letting her flawless, refined posture serve as undeniable proof of her high-class training. Executing a breathtakingly graceful curtsy, Chelsea allows her perfectly refined movement to silence any remaining doubts in the stifling room. Flashing a serene, genuinely confident smile, she fondly reflects on how incredibly meaningful the royal tea party turned out to be for her future. She casually lists the prominent figures she conversed with, mentioning Lord Kendall, Lady Susanna, and His Highness Theodore to firmly cement her newly elevated social standing. Beaming brightly at her utterly defeated family, she confidently asks if they have any further complaints to level against her. Noting their stunned, cowardly silence, she gracefully excuses herself from the parlor without waiting for their dismissal. Walking quietly down the empty hallway, the rhythmic click of her elegant heels echoes victoriously through the silent manor. Two loyal maids wait anxiously outside her bedroom double doors, perking up the moment they spot their beloved mistress approaching. The twin maids enthusiastically welcome their lady back home with bright, deeply relieved smiles. Staring at her devoted servants, Chelsea's elegant and untouchable facade finally softens into a look of profound, vulnerable exhaustion. The maids gently admit that they have already heard whispers regarding the disastrous events that transpired at the academy earlier that day. They look at her with deep, unspoken sympathy, silently asking for the real truth regarding what happened to her beautiful dress. A haunting visual montage of her family's cruel abuse flashes through her mind, standing in stark contrast to the unwavering warmth of her loyal maids. One maid firmly steps forward and states her absolute belief that the truth must be vastly different from the vicious lies Jennifer has been spreading. Chelsea suddenly swoons from pure physical exhaustion, prompting the panicked maids to instantly catch her while offering gentle words of comfort. Writhing in comedic, dramatic agony, Chelsea cries out for them to immediately remove her throbbing, overly tight corset. Safely tucked into the comfort of her own room, she is presented with a steaming, beautifully ornate cup of warm tea to help calm her frayed nerves. Sitting comfortably in her soft nightgown, she softly thanks them for their incredible, unwavering kindness. Inspecting the beautifully repaired gown, the maids praise its exquisite embroidery while Chelsea promises to take excellent care of it before properly returning it. Breaking down into ugly, genuine tears, Chelsea repeatedly apologizes for allowing the beautiful dress they crafted for her to get utterly ruined. The maids fiercely shake their heads and rush to comfort their weeping lady, passionately insisting that she did absolutely nothing wrong. Tears stream down her face as she mourns the destruction of their hard work, heartbroken that their loving, dedicated effort was violently torn apart by her sister. She bitterly blames herself for the entire disaster, wondering if the humiliating confrontation could have been avoided if she had simply been more careful. A maid lovingly wipes the tears from Chelsea's face, warmly reminding her that she did her absolute best to protect their honor. Surrounded by the unconditional love and safety of her servants, Chelsea quietly sips her warm tea as the violent emotional storm finally passes. The maids practically vibrate with sheer disbelief and excitement when Chelsea casually mentions that Her Majesty the Queen personally complimented the dress they designed. Smiling playfully at their shock, Chelsea adds even more staggering news by revealing that Prince Valentino, Lord Kendall, and Lady Susanna were all at the gathering. Her cheerful expression shines brightly as she proudly announces that she managed to make genuine, powerful friends with the high-ranking nobles. The maids internally review the absolutely staggering lineup of elites she just listed, completely awestruck by her sudden and massive leap in social standing. Flabbergasted by the impossible news, they loudly demand to know how she possibly managed to befriend such an intimidating, prestigious group of people all at once. Eyes sparkling with eager, insatiable curiosity, the maids beg her to sit down and tell them every single detail of her miraculous day. The scene peacefully transitions to the sunlit, grand windows of the estate, signaling a bright, hopeful new chapter for the formerly downtrodden noblewoman. Slowly returning to consciousness, Chelsea lets out a soft, tired groan. Sitting up in her lavish bed, she brushes off her weariness, assuming her muscle aches are just lingering fatigue from yesterday's events. Two cheerful maids burst into the room carrying a silver tea tray and fresh fruit, enthusiastically wishing Lady Chelsea a good morning. Startled by their sudden and energetic appearance, Chelsea stares at them with wide, confused eyes. One of the maids politely offers her a pre-breakfast drink while warmly asking if she managed to sleep well. Still completely bewildered, Chelsea immediately questions the identity of these two unfamiliar servants. Realizing exactly who they are, she points out that they are actually Lady Jennifer's maids, causing the two women to flinch in shock. The maids quickly explain that they have been reassigned to take care of her starting today, claiming it is for her own benefit. A flashback reveals an older, stern head maid dismissing them from Jennifer's service, ordering them to serve Chelsea instead because they are no longer needed. The head maid had harshly criticized their uselessness for only preparing tea, scolding them for their selfishness while wondering if they truly had Chelsea's best interests at heart. Back in the present, the maids try to coax Chelsea into leaving everything to them, but she flatly refuses and demands they leave her room. Maintaining her ground, Chelsea firmly states that the ones leaving are obviously the two of them. Stunned by her coldness, the maids try to manipulate her by suggesting she no longer needs to hold back the envy she always displayed. Disgusted by their sudden change in attitude after years of mockery, Chelsea declares that her only maids are Nelchi and Lily-Nyan, forbidding them from making decisions for her. Glaring at them with piercing eyes, she coldly states that she simply doesn't need maids like them. The two maids grimace in deep frustration, clicking their tongues at her harsh and unexpected rejection. As they storm down the hallway with clattering footsteps, they bitterly complain that a mistress with such a terrible attitude is just as bad as her chosen maids. Still fuming over the rejection, one maid wonders aloud why the household suddenly shifted their treatment of Chelsea. Meanwhile, Nelchi and Lilynyan watch the exchange with pure awe, praising Lady Chelsea for looking so incredibly cool while thanking her. They realize the other maids are only switching sides because they overheard yesterday's conversation and want to exploit Chelsea's new connections with His Highness and the Duke's son. Chelsea sits in bed with a frustrated sigh, finding it unbelievable that the hired help thinks they can act however they please just because she is suddenly considered useful. Taking a weary sip of her tea, she closes her eyes and wonders what on earth is going wrong with this household. Elsewhere, elegant noblewomen gather in a grand, sunlit parlor adorned with chandeliers and floral decorations for a high society tea party. A sophisticated lady in a wide-brimmed floral hat casually mentions the swirling rumors to Marchioness Lunand, setting a tense atmosphere in the ladies' society. She reveals the scandalous gossip that Marchioness Lunand's son allegedly raised a hand against her own daughter during yesterday's tea party. As another noblewoman confirms hearing the exact same story from her daughter, the Marchioness shatters her teacup in utter, wide-eyed shock. The ladies harshly condemn the violent act, noting how completely unacceptable it is for a man to lay hands on a young lady, especially while causing a scene at a royal-hosted event. They recount the terrifying details, explaining how frightening it was for the young girls to witness Lord Damien shouting and aggressively grabbing at Chelsea. With a condescending smile, the lady in the floral hat implies that the Marchioness has raised her children with far too much leniency. Humiliated and enraged, Marchioness Lunand grinds her teeth and clicks her tongue as her face contorts in dark, seething fury. Bursting violently into a room, the furious Marchioness throws the double doors open and screams Chelsea's name. Startled at her wooden desk with a quill in hand, Chelsea jumps and exclaims that her mother scared her. Looming over her with a dark, intense aura, the Marchioness demands to know if Damien truly did that to her and if what she said yesterday was actually true. Unfazed by her mother's desperate, sweating face, Chelsea calmly confirms that it is true, noting that the lady's reactions prove Damien really did lay hands on her. Panicking intensely, the Marchioness worries that if Duchess Maeve thinks poorly of them, she might completely lose her precious standing in the ladies' society. Trembling with realization, she understands that this also means the rumors of Chelsea being personally taught by Duchess Maeve must be entirely true. Chelsea ruthlessly points out that her family rejected her so much she felt like an outcast, forcing her mother to face the harsh truth of their actions. Stunned by the blunt accusation, the Marchioness stammers and sweats, struggling to formulate a cohesive excuse. She bites her lip in deep frustration, completely unable to deny the undeniable reality of her neglectful parenting. A flashback reveals the painful truth that, compared to Damien and Jennifer, Chelsea was always considered severely lacking in her parents' eyes. Because of this constant, unfair comparison, Chelsea was cruelly branded a defective noble lady before they even realized the lasting damage they were doing. Ever since childhood, she was isolated and cast aside to read alone while her siblings played joyfully together. A young, smiling Damien is shown studying diligently, highlighting the established narrative that Chelsea was never as bright as him. Similarly, she was entirely dismissed because she was never viewed as being as sweet as her sister, Jennifer. The Marchioness shouts defensively, aggressively declaring that those two are their absolute ideal children. Snapping back to the present, the Marchioness claims they had no choice, prompting a cold, fierce glare from Chelsea, who challenges what that pathetic excuse is supposed to mean. Ignoring the question, the desperate mother orders Chelsea to immediately write a letter to Duchess Maeve so they can send a gift, but Chelsea dryly replies she is already writing it. Standing proudly by her desk, Chelsea interrogates her mother about why Jennifer's maids barged into her room this morning to claim they would be taking care of her from now on. The Marchioness pauses, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief at the sheer audacity of the servants' unauthorized actions. Holding a strawberry with absolute authority, Chelsea coldly asks if her mother shouldn't be the one keeping proper track of what is actually happening in their own house. Biting into a fresh strawberry, Chelsea frowns in confusion, wondering what her mother meant by telling her not to act selfishly like the others. Chewing thoughtfully, Chelsea remarks that her mother seemed incredibly on edge, forcing her way through the situation with completely absurd logic. A few days later, a flustered maid rushes into the room carrying an elegant wax-sealed envelope, breathlessly announcing that a letter has arrived from Duchess Maeve. Chelsea's face immediately lights up with pure joy at receiving a letter from her beloved teacher, while her maid loudly shrieks in disbelief that Lord Kendall is coming to personally thank her. Recalling her mother's stern command for Jennifer to hold back this time, Chelsea stares blankly at the letter, utterly bewildered as to why Lord Kendall would specifically visit her older sister. Snapping out of her confusion, Chelsea's eyes widen as she spots a separate, smaller memo tucked inside the envelope addressed directly to her. The sight of the memo triggers a warm memory of the elegant Duchess Maeve quietly assuring Chelsea that she only needed to ask if she ever required anything. Just as her maids enthusiastically urge her to seize this golden opportunity to ask for anything she desires, the heavy wooden doors slam open to reveal her deeply panicked mother. Completely oblivious to the sudden intrusion, the excited maids immediately begin drafting a shopping list, cheerfully suggesting they request new dresses and accessories perfectly matched to Chelsea's tastes. Sitting happily at her sunlit desk, Chelsea excitedly breaks the wax seal on her memo, playfully pondering what wonderful things she should ask for. The neatly penned note from Kendall brightly declares his intention to visit her very soon, playfully teasing that he has a special surprise planned for that day. Meanwhile, heavy rain pours down the towering spires of a magnificent castle, setting a somber tone as an unseen figure notes the highly suspicious way the Lunand Marquis family treats Chelsea. Inside a grand, dimly lit study, a dark-haired nobleman sits elegantly on a leather sofa, confirming to his blonde companion that he is indeed holding the letter Chelsea sent to her mother. Flashing a knowing sneer, the dark-haired man explains that his mother firmly believes a child of Chelsea's caliber would never willingly write such a shallow, surface-level letter. Tapping the parchment with definitive authority, he states that someone within the Marquis household must have intercepted the letter and forced her to completely rewrite it. Hearing this undeniable proof of mistreatment, Kendall glares fiercely toward the rainy window, his eyes burning with quiet resolve as he firmly declares that he will go too. Stepping out of the shadows, he formally announces his intention to visit the Marquis household in the near future so he can personally check on Chelsea's well-being. Outside, thunder rumbles ominously against the tall arched windows as Kendall tightly grips the edge of the wooden desk, his knuckles turning white with repressed tension. Leaning back with a satisfied smirk, the dark-haired man admits he fully expected Kendall's protective reaction, which is exactly why he sent Chelsea a little surprise warning in advance. Peering over his steepled fingers, he teasingly questions if it is truly acceptable for the Crown Prince to make such a specific, personal visit to a young lady. Visibly flustered by the heavy title, Kendall quickly averts his gaze, defensively arguing that being deeply worried about a friend is a perfectly natural response. The dark-haired man bursts into genuine, hearty laughter, highly amused by Kendall's desperate attempt to label his obvious affection as mere friendship. Glaring with clear embarrassment, Kendall demands to know what is so incredibly funny, prompting his friend to playfully cover his mouth and dismiss the laughter. Still smiling warmly with a knowing glint in his eye, the friend smoothly agrees that there is absolutely no problem at all with the visit.